tie in perfect to what
you want to
you
do,
are working
right?
on.
I started recording,
Yeah.
so we'll
All right.
not a
Very
lot of
good.
pre-show. I
Very
think
good.
we'll just jump right
Not
in.
not getting philosophical until the show. Here we go. Yeah, we're robbing everybody of a lack of a pre-show this week,
Yeah.
but
Well,
we'll
we'll try to get to that.
we'll get back in the mood. Here we go. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the science of fantasy football. Why the science of fantasy football? Well, you get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use the scientific method, and that is guaranteed to make you a better fantasy football player. I know. How can I give any guarantees in fantasy football where there's so much chaos involved? And no, I'm not setting myself up for a retweet from our friends at Fantasy Receipts, because using the scientific method just means you're going to use statistics to guide you to an answer instead of using statistics to back up something you are already thinking. So that is going to make you a better fantasy football player. And joining me as he does each and every episode, he is the fantasy professor. He's a real professor emeritus. It's John Bush. John, welcome back.
That's right. Had a little vacation up in Alaska. It was very nice. Uh, Got to see lots of sights, and it's wonderful to take a little break. I come back and I'm looking at the ADPs, and I think people been a few cases losing their minds a little bit, but that's okay. It's not. I'm not ready to do best ball yet. I'm just watching, just sitting from the weeds, watching all the stuff happening, lots of craziness, and I think that will continue, Dennis. And I know you've got observations. You've been my eyes and ears since I was on vacay, so I'm sure you got lots to pontificate about that's been going on the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, we have entered the realm of what I like to call bad take season. We're starting to get the OTAs, so that teams are posting videos, and everybody looks like a superstar. And I realized one thing about these videos before I get to my gripe of the week. When you're watching an offense on a team absolutely roasting the defense to the point of having a highlight reel type play, keep in mind that they're playing against their own team's defense. And when you see defense making a great play, realize they're going up against their own offense and their own offensive line. So we have no idea whether the offense is great or the defense sucks, or if the defense is great and the offensive line sucks. We have no idea. But this is bad take season, and I saw possibly the absolute worst best take or bad take that I've ever seen. These bold, this player could be number one overall as running back one. Kendra Miller from the New Orleans Saints was proposed by somebody as he's got the upside of being RB1 in fantasy football. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Alvin Kamara is not dead yet. Alvin Kamara, even if Kendra Miller has the camp of his life and wins a bigger role, Alvin Kamara is still going to be getting a lot of playing time on passing downs. That's going to take away from the chance of Kendra Miller being the top dog. And here's the other problem. The New Orleans Saints drafted another running back. So Kendra Miller might not even be the backup.
You talking about Devin
Or,
Neal?
yes, Devin Neal does some things that Kendra Miller doesn't. And he does some things that really Alvin Kamara's not, it's not his specialty either. So I think if anything, like if Kamara were to get injured before
Uh-oh.
the season started,
Right.
still don't think Kendra Miller has a chance of being the number one running back in all of fantasy football. Because in order to have that happen, he needs to get like 80% of the touches. And the New Orleans Saints have to be a pretty good offense. And I think there's a good chance that neither of those options happen because Neal is pretty good. They just signed Cam Akers. They got Clyde Edwards-Helaire still on the roster. Now, Akers or Helaire could very easily be cut before the season. But a team that thought that Kendra Miller was all that to take over from Alvin Kamara and kick him to the bench, which is what is needed to be the RB1 overall in fantasy football. Now, if you wanted to say Kendra Miller has tremendous upside in fantasy football and could be a valuable fantasy football player, a sneaky value, I'd say, hell yeah, he sure does. That's a legitimate take. A bad take is it's possible he could be RB1 overall. As I said on Twitter, it's possible that I'm the starting center for the Chicago Bulls next year. All I got to do is win the lottery and be willing to pay $200 million to the Chicago Bulls to hire me to be the center of their team. And then everybody can laugh at the 5'4", 5'5" center in the NBA, the old white guy who can't jump. That's the way I could buy my way into being a starting player in the NBA. And that is more likely to happen than Kendra Miller being the RB1 in fantasy football this year. That's my gripe of the week.
That's a bold take. Not sure how you approach that. I you know, I agree. I I just don't. I'm looking at how that shapes up, and the public uh, likes Kamara 4 times better than Miller, and likes Devin and Neal slightly better than Miller. In other words, if Kamara went down tomorrow, the public thinks it's 1A, 1B, Neal and Miller together splitting. It would, if you believe the ADP, best ball ADP from FFPC, then it would be 1A, 1B, and they'd be splitting it up. I mean, we hadn't even seen anything yet, but I'm just saying if we're using some type of metrics to start looking at that, that's what it says. It says, Kamara is, that's where he would be. Kamara is right now, let's see, where are you, Kamara? He is pretty deep. He's RB, at 49th ADP, and he's down there, for a while there. You'll get him, fourth round, early fourth. He's right on top of Mixon. They're like tied.
Wow.
So that's your choice. Wow. And Hubbard. So they're sitting right together Kamara, Mixon, Hubbard, and then Tavon Henderson and James Conner. Those five are sitting right in fourth round. So you can grab one, who you going to pick kind of thing. And
And
that's intriguing.
there's an outside chance that you could get two of them. Like
maybe, yeah.
Because the variance gets wide enough depending on where you're drafted and all that stuff. You got a chance of getting two of them. Not a probability of getting two of them, but you got an outside chance of getting them. And man, that's where you'll be feasting on running backs this year. Everybody talks about the running back dead zone. That's the running back value zone, in my opinion.
We called it opportunity zone.
Oh yeah. You got Breece Hall. You got, there are so many guys that are like Breece Hall's about 15 picks ahead, but then it drops down, and Kamara, Mixon, all those guys are just hanging, and those are the spots in the draft that I absolutely love to exploit.
Yeah. Well, I graph it more, Dennis, with my landscape mapping of it, and right now I didn't do that. I'm just starting to, like I said, I'm just floating around watching, and this is not. I know you're into drafting. I'm not yet, and I probably won't be till late July. I might start some best ball. Certainly probably before the expo, just to wet my whip, but it's not the time. It's June 14th. I'm figuring another month before.
And I'm playing with a few leagues just to get in the routine of drafting and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not serious about, like, I'm not ready to plant flags. That's another one of our favorite sayings now.
What is the definition of planting a flag now? What does that mean? Who is a flag and who isn't?
It's whatever.
Is there half a flag? Is there 90% of a flag? What does that mean? Yeah.
It's whatever you want it to mean.
Yeah, I understand. After the fact, I told you he was going to be good. Well, if you mention everybody, you're going to be right,
Planted my flag.
Yeah. So anyway, Dennis, I do want to circle back to the ADP. That's going to, I have some stuff to present a little bit, just some things that I think, But I know you've got another issue, because I was watching Twitter, and you got cranky about AI at Yahoo. And Yahoo has done some cleaning, getting rid of some really historically stellar pundit over there. It looks like they're going to go find people off the street, I guess, or just use AI and not replace, any of the expertise that's there. And that's sad for them, and you wonder what all that means. And I've got some stuff, but I'm gonna let you start that off. Gripe 2, or whatever you want to call it, AI at Yahoo, and AI maybe in general here.
Yeah, and before I get into that, I just wanted to show the counterpoint of a bold take.
Okay.
That is an example of a good bold take.
Okay.
So, Kendra Miller, RB1 overall, that's preposterous.
Yeah.
Like, I'll place a wager on that, and I will give high odds. Okay. Sean Mitchell, who's a really good best ball player, had a very bold statement today. He said that Calvin Ridley has the upside of WR1, top wide receiver in all of fantasy.
Now, Calvin, is that points. Tennessee? Who does Calvin play
Calvin
for?
Ridley with Tennessee, correct. Tennessee. You got it right.
I'm looking at Tennessee. Okay.
So here's the thing.
Okay.
Is it likely to happen? No, it's not likely to happen. But he didn't say it was likely. He said it was possible.
Yeah.
So Calvin Ridley's got back class before
Yeah.
his injury and before the
Yeah.
season that he lost in 22.
Yeah.
He's got back class
Yeah.
that is quite impressive in fantasy football.
Yeah.
Calvin Ridley also has a totally new offense and a new quarterback. If Cam Ward is really, really good, so if Cam Ward has a rookie season similar to Jaden Daniels from last year, which I think, while it's not a likelihood, it's not something I would bet on happening, even at a comfortable, you give me 20, 30 to 1 odds, and I'm still not betting on it for him to be as good in fantasy football as Jaden Daniels. Not taking that bet. But it's a possibility. Like there's a 3%, 5% chance if all of the cards and all of the, everything in the world aligns, Cam Ward could be outstanding. And if that happens, Calvin Ridley, if he plays all 17 games, could lead the league in total points. It's not preposterous. It's bold. It's daring. It's probably wrong. Okay. There's probably 20 guys I'd put ahead of him. But if you lead your team in targets this year, and when I say in this context, it's not leading the wide receiver room in targets, it's leading everybody on your team in targets. You got a shot at being the top wide receiver in fantasy football. You do. Do you have as good of a chance as the other 31 target leaders on your team, on the team? Probably not ahead of Chase and Jefferson and Lamb and Neighbors and Nakua and Thomas and St. Brown and Collins. And I could go on and on. But at some point, there's a possibility that Calvin Ridley could lead the NFL in total fantasy points in a PPR league. It's possible. Tennessee could be playing from behind enough. If Cam Ward is great, if this offense under new coaching is suddenly better, maybe, because everything would have to align, but there's nothing that says this can't happen versus the Kendra Miller take that was just so preposterous for reasons that I pointed out. But that's the difference between bold and idiocy in fantasy football. And that's plenty bold. But what it tells you is if I get to that point in the draft and I am picked 79, 80-ish, where Calvin Ridley was going recently, and we'll get
77
an update from you. 77.
Yeah.
So he hasn't gone up much.
Nope.
So late 70s.
Higher than Deebo Samuel, which is interesting.
And Deebo's the second wide receiver on his team behind McLaurin.
Yeah, yeah.
So it makes sense. I think Waddle's got a better chance than Ridley, and he's not going that far ahead of him. But that would take Tyreek Hill flaming out. That would take Miami's defense being lousy. It would take Waddle becoming the player he was.
Waddle is 68.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the kind of thing. Like, if you can lead your team in targets, you can lead in total fantasy points. Now, you notice I didn't say I think Calvin Ridley could be the number one wide receiver in weekly value. My statistical way of looking at the game, and yours with the Bush number, and with
I don't think so.
I would put that chance at less than 2%. But to lead in points, yeah, if there's a lot of guys that miss a game, sure. If you can lead your team in targets, you can lead the league in total points. You're not going to lead the league in fantasy football weekly value by just showing up. You're going to have to be spectacular. And I don't think Calvin Ridley's got that left in him. But total points, yeah, that shows you how deceiving total points can be. Because what if Chase misses 2 games? What if Jefferson misses 2 games? Lamb, Neighbors, Nakua, Thomas, St. Brown, Collins, they all miss 1 to 3 games. Then that opens the door for somebody weird to step up and take the point title. It could be Jackson Smith-Njigba. Could be Tyreek Hill. He could go back to the top. Or Waddle. Could be Marvin Harrison Jr. for crying out loud. Like if you lead your team in targets, and that would take McBride stepping back as well as Harrison stepping up. But my point is, there are plenty of obscure players with that upside potential. Devontae Adams could have a super year. He's got the back class to do it. If Nakua gets hurt, maybe Adams is the guy. DJ Moore could do it for the Bears. There's a lot of bold takes out there that you can go for. You don't have to go for the preposterous. And that's kind of my bold take of or that's my gripe of the week, I should say.
So, Dennis, I will comment, and then we can go to AI. It's June 14th. Is there a reason to be locking yourself in? All the decision makers and from the psych side of the world suggest you delay your decision making for as long as possible.
Oh yeah.
Until you need to make a decision, because you can start anchoring yourself in. In other words, if I proposed Calvin Ridley is this, and in July other things have happened, Cam Ward hurt or whatever, does that influence me in a month? In other words, is this the time to anchor yourself to any kind of opinions versus trying to be as fluid as possible? And that's where I'm at, and that's how I look at ADP is staying in the stream, not moving to the side where there's a lot of water flow, because you get stuck. It's a trick, and you just don't want to get anchored until it's time. When you make your selection in your draft, time's up. But until that point, you have time to think. But if you start anchoring in June, are you going to be able to pivot in August? Because I said Ridley could, boy, I don't want to go against my, if you put it out there, especially, do you come back in April, August? Well, yeah, I was in June, I said this, but I was completely wrong. I'm over here now. That's hard to do as a pundit, to back off on claims and you're anchoring yourself in. So I would suggest the few that listen to us, don't anchor yourself with any of these kind of stuff. I mean, there's no, what do you get paid for that? It's not like you're working for a fantasy company. So, we're going to give $100 every time you anchor yourself in for a bold take, I mean, really, there's no extra clicks, right? They want you to, anchor every day, right? Every 30 minutes, you got a new bold take, right? Could get those clicks. And so, what's going on here at this point? Why are you worried about it at this point? So that's just from my perspective, Dennis. I'm not out here trying to make anybody think I'm anything. I'm just floating in the weeds, not much happening. And all of a sudden, I grab you. I'm that barracuda and I'm just floating. So I'm going to be floating in the weeds for a while, Dennis.
In my opinion, you should be floating in the weeds on every player until that player is off the board.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's no such thing as a lock in fantasy football.
Yeah.
Okay. There is no such thing as a player that my favorite is I won't draft so and so this year.
We all laugh at that, Dennis.
And
everybody's a value somewhere in the
yeah,
draft.
yeah, the only guys I'm not drafting this year in fantasy football, I don't think OJ Simpson's going to make a comeback.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't think Henry Ruggs is going to make a comeback this year. Now, next year, when he gets out of prison, I might have to rethink my stance. Yeah. So in Dynasty, towards the end of this season, you know what I'm going to be doing?
You're going to be looking.
I'm going to be picking up Henry Ruggs in every Dynasty league.
Why not?
I can always drop him again.
Yeah.
Like, I'll always have trash at the end of my roster that I can throw out, or I'll have guys that get hurt and I have to replace somebody. But yeah, I don't lock in on a player ever. Like, until he's gone, then I'm only locked in for him on that draft. He's either locked in because he's on my roster, he's locked in because somebody else took him.
Yeah. So,
but I get past.
Yeah.
I get past the fourth round in drafts. I'm looking only at upside. What could this player do if everything goes right? That's how you get the surprise guys, quote unquote, like Baker Mayfield, like a Bo Nix, like even, like Kyron Williams a few years ago, like Chase Brown last year, like Bucky Irving last year. You don't look at what's the most logical outcome for that player.
Yeah.
After the fourth draft pick I make, fourth round of the draft, starting with round 5 and beyond, and more beyond you get from pick 4 and 5, the more you look at upside. I don't understand this logic of, okay, I'm picking the 35th wide receiver off the board, and I'm going to be happy if he finishes 33rd in points. No, I want him to finish 20th. Like, I want him to finish 10th. Like, if I'm drafting a player, I want them to be top 25 this year, even if I'm drafting in the 15th round. I realize that my hit percentage is going to go way down as the rounds go up, and I don't care. Like this year, if I get late in a draft and I've already got my wide receiver and running back rooms solid, and I got my tight ends solid, and I get down to the last pick in the draft, and I got one more pick to make, and I haven't maxed out at quarterbacks yet. I'll consider Tua, Cam Ward, Bryce, Matthew Stafford, Penix from Atlanta, McCarthy from Minnesota. Those are the guys going late in drafts right now at the quarterback position. I'll add them. I might even add them as a third quarterback on my team. Even in one quarterback leagues, folks. Because if I can hoard quarterbacks, I can always drop one or trade one if I need the space to pick up another player. But if you treat the league that you don't even know what you don't even know on June 14th, you're going to be much more successful in fantasy football.
Okay. We'll come back to ADP. Let's talk about AI.
Yep. Want to talk about AI for just a minute from two different standpoints.
Okay.
First of all, Andy Barron's at Yahoo Fantasy. Not that I think Andy Barron's is the smartest man in fantasy football, but he's entertaining. And that counts for something when you're writing articles for a major outlet. And he wasn't horrible at his job of identifying who the best players are. I don't think he's the best. I don't think he's even comparable to a Jim Coventry or Bob Harris or Jeff Manns. Those are other big names, or a Matthew Berry. Those are four big names that I think are better at fantasy football than Andy Barron's. But Andy Barron's is entertaining as hell. He's good. He's a good, entertaining writer. And he's been doing it for a long time. And it's not about replacing guys with AI that ticked me off so much. It was the fact that days after getting rid of several of their popular people, that they put out an article and they said, well, this was generated by AI, and if you find any mistakes, let us know. That was so tacky. It was no different than United Airlines getting rid of their weather forecasting department and then finding somebody else to blame when the weather went bad and they were unprepared. Like, it's stupid to brag about the fact that you've replaced a group, gotten rid of a group, and then here's AI. This is what we're doing. So that pissed me off at Yahoo, which I was planning to go back and spend some money on this year. Now I'm kind of, will I or won't I? I might, because maybe enough people who are good players will quit because they're mad. And maybe there'll be easier money to be made. And I'm about the ROI, Professor. I'm not afraid to say that. So that's a group of, it's fine to be pissed at Yahoo for the way they handled this. And to say, I'm not playing at Yahoo anymore. That's perfectly fine. But it went beyond that with what I saw this week.
Okay.
It was people fearing AI, fearing artificial intelligence. And here's the thing. It's like a weather forecaster being scared of weather models because they do a lot of the job that we used to have to do with our brains are now being done with models. And your job has changed from sort of analyzing the movement of systems to figuring out which model is doing it right. And yes, in the industry, about 70% of the forecasters under age 40 don't know how to forecast without a model. So they've become model readers rather than true weather forecasters. That's the danger once you introduce machines into the mix. But that happened because people are lazy. That didn't happen because the weather forecasters suddenly couldn't think on their own. They can't think on their own, some of them. There's still 30% good ones under age 40. The ones that are smart realize that the machine is a tool, that AI, or in this case, computer models, AI, they're similar things. They're just a machine making decisions based on an algorithm. That's all a weather model is. It's just analyzing the data faster than I can. It makes mistakes. A smart weather forecaster can notice those quicker than the machines because the mid updates, there's model updates between the when they send up weather balloons. Those models are awful. They're awful on many days because they take mistakes and they compound them. So you don't need to be fearful of AI, because right now in forecasting of fantasy football, AI is just identifying the consensus. It's not doing anything more than that. And we already understand the consensus. And we understand that the job is beating the consensus. So AI might even make beating the consensus easier for us who are willing to still put in the time to do the work. AI is going to defeat those who are the lazy forecasters. In meteorology, that's become 70% of the younger folks because they never learned the meatball meteorology methods. They're no longer taught. You no longer learn them unless you work with an old codger forecaster like myself, who picked it up from the previous generation. So there's no reason to fear AI right now in fantasy football, because AI is just going to replace the incompetent people. And that doesn't mean that Andy Behrens and the guys at Yahoo are incompetent. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they made a business decision that said having talented writers no longer moves the needle enough for us to pay for those people. And that's probably due to the customers making the choice. Just like TV news on cable has become total nonsense and trash because that's what we chose as consumers to consume. So if we choose to consume the consensus identifying stuff that AI is putting out, then AI wins as far as the jobs go in the industry. But beating AI, the more AI is used, I think the easier it's going to be for smart people to beat the consensus. And that's what we're trying to do here at Science of Fantasy Football.
Okay. The big thing is eventually there will be a button. Instead of auto draft by ADP, that'll be auto draft by AI. And I think when that happens, whatever platform, it would be to our advantage to be there because, Dennis, if you remember, the studies on number of variables, confidence, and prediction ability. The more variables you give, the more confident people are about their same level of prediction. In other words, at some point, they've done the study that at some point it doesn't matter anymore. The human mind or whatever, 10 variables versus 50, you feel more confident about the same success. So, Dennis, if the day after buyer number became public and some people tracked, they had their bankroll, would they be looser or tighter with their money if you say, here's the buyer numbers, what you going to do? I would argue there for a while, people are just going to go ape crazy nuts and forget all common sense well, AI said it.
Yeah.
So, Dennis, it's to our advantage to be there to take advantage. So AI and drafting by AI is good for us, Dennis, for a while. And then people realize it's not, I'm not a millionaire anymore. I'm not winning the DraftKings million by AI. And at that, so there's going to be, I don't know when that button gets on these machines, these platforms, but I'm just waiting for that. Right now we laugh at auto drafting, tee hee hee, but we've all seen every once in a while auto drafters are very competitive and make it to the playoffs, and it's just like that makes you angry because they were probably passed out drunk and hit the auto draft and got lucky. Well, ADP versus AI, Dennis, it's a good thing. It's to our advantage because our data and our approach is going to be sacred, secret knowledge, and that's going to give us an advantage. If everybody has superpowers, then nobody does, right? If you remember the Incredibles, the little the villain, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to make everybody, because he wasn't a superhero. He wanted to make everybody have powers so that really nobody did. So once AI is out there, then I think we'll have even a little bit more advantage. Not like, we'll pay off our mortgage, but we'll have some more opportunities because AI everybody will be following it. So that means whatever's out of sync with AI that we feel is a good value, then we have an opportunity. We'll get a better odds on our, the horse that has the low buyer, because say last time he was on turf and today he's on dirt, right? People just, okay, yeah, he made a 50 on buyer. Yeah, that was on the turf. Look at a couple, races ago, and he was maybe an 80 on dirt. That kind of, I mean, we've seen it at the track. People just look at the last race and, well, that's it. He's going to do, and then they get mad when it's not that way. The jockeys tricking, trainers doping. I mean, it gets all crazy to explain. Horses with a jock change, a class drop, a track change, a surface. You've seen it all the time. Post position in harness from post
Oh
position,
yeah.
8 to
Yep.
1 this week. It can make a big difference on how the trip comes about. So things are not like they were, but AI is going to be just a way to keep track of the data. So
Oh
I
yeah.
use Grok 3, Dennis, and I'm showing this. I just asked the question, who are the best running backs on the Denver Broncos? And it says the first one up is RJ Harvey, then J.K. Dobbins, then Estime, then McLaughlin. So they're saying, so rank wise, and then Tyler Batty. And notice the statements around all of them. I was really impressed when Batty actually had 8.6 yards in limited action and he became injured. And this, the AI says his health remains a question. Well, at some point, that his ADP might be worth. If you have Harvey, might you want to team up with some of these, these ones that could flash? That kind of thing. So I would argue that AI gives you a starting point to get deeper and look at what, say, our data is or what others say. So I wouldn't fear it at all. So I think it's good that it's
No.
coming because I think we can take advantage of that. And if Yahoo does, draft by AI, they'll advertise it and well, easy money. then everybody's going to loosen up their bankroll. Instead of being in a $10 league, they'll be in a $100 league, and they'll be, it'd be smaller fish, and the sharks will eat better. So I like that, Dennis. I like that a lot. So, but anyway, I just wanted to show an example of, what at least using Grok 3 on Twitter or X does for you. And it gives you the good and the bad, that kind of thing. I mean, it's really nice that way. I'm not ready to do this yet, but I'll just use this as an example to give Dennis, get him cranked up here. So those are my things. It's good. It's probably coming. Auto AI drafting is on the way. Let's get ready, Dennis. I argue you and I, what we're doing, we will, because how we approach, we will be in a nice position to take advantage when people start loosen their bankroll and start playing, $400 leagues versus, $10 leagues, and they're going to get crazy. Well, I can make the big money, and the people going to go crazy, and you see it all the time at the track. And people, whatever, the tip sheet had 5 winners last week. Well, man, I'm betting everyone. I'm doubling my money. Do the keep doubling till you hit kind of thing. I mean, people get crazy at it. And remember, when the hot dog man tells you something, it's time to go completely opposite or just set on the race. So just remember, you know, when the hot dog man is giving you stock tips, Dennis, it's time to get out of the stock market because it's getting too crazy if you're getting tips from the hot dog man to buy your AI stocks or whatever. So I
Yeah,
said a
and
lot,
here's the
Dennis.
thing that we could, yeah, you said a lot. I'm just going to follow up on this quickly and say this.
Okay.
In fantasy football, I don't believe that there's enough money from an analysis or even money from playing fantasy football for most people to invest the amount of money that would need to be invested to make a fantasy football specific AI. Now, imagine this. Imagine if we were able to develop an AI that harnessed our weekly values tools and also harnessed the knowledge of 5 more of the brightest minds in fantasy football. And they'd have to be 5 of the brightest minds that weren't incredibly popular. Because the guys that are incredibly popular, like Bob Harris, Jim Coventry, Jeff Mans, they adjust the consensus. The guys at Football Guys, they're popular enough that they affect the ADP. And that's a great thing. And I'm not saying that's a great thing because they're not good at fantasy football. I'm saying that's a great thing because you can know it's coming. And you can know, okay, if this player all of a sudden gets touted by 4 or 5 of the biggest names in fantasy football, his ADP is going to change. If they're bragging about the guy, his ADP is going to lower. If they are dissing the guy, his ADP is going to increase. You know it's coming, so you can adapt to that. But imagine if AI was built specific to find 5 of the brightest people in fantasy football at actually playing the games and was able to harness the best of each of those people's abilities. And these were people in the shadows, but they're really good at fantasy football. Every year they're a contender for the big titles. Every year they're making money in their leagues because they're every year beating consensus. And they're figuring out different ways to do it every year. They're staying constant, updated. They're evolving with the game, which is what you and I are attempting to always do. We're not staying stagnant. We're always testing our theories against the newest data because we understand that the game is evolving and therefore fantasy football is evolving. But if you were able to build a machine that did that with no emotions and no ability to be tainted by the noise around them, you'd have a better tool than using a generic AI that is not specifically geared for fantasy football. In fantasy football, I believe that most of the people developing fantasy football AI tools will be using a generic off-the-shelf Grok 3, Chat GPT, or any of the other generic AIs that are coming online. That's what they'll use. Those will identify consensus more clearly for us than even ADP does today. And that's a good thing. But don't fear AI because AI is not going to be creative and funny in a unique way. AI is not going to come up with unique ways to look at statistics. If you asked AI the best method for forecasting fantasy football, they won't come up with our methods that we know beat consensus.
Yeah.
They would come up with something completely different. Yeah. And I'm not even sure what that would be.
Let's see. I wonder what trying to say principal component analysis for fantasy football. I'm just curious what Grok
I love
will
these
say.
Live updates.
Yeah, let's
live
see.
Updates right on the show, folks.
Can be useful. Whether you should use it depends on your goal and complexity. So the fact that they haven't found so suppose you have a data set with 20 stats. Okay. Component 1, very good. Component, yes. A few key stats. Oh, I like Dennis, this is good stuff.
It's pretty smart at analyzing basic questions.
If you're a tech really savvy with a large database, yes. Well, Dennis, damn it. This is exactly, folks, what I'm trying to do is take all our metrics.
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm going to run and look for these components and figure them all out. And looky here, if you want to try it, gather a data set and use, to run it. You don't, folks, I'm not going to say what I use, but there's a free thing that's really easy that you can drop for your Excel, and you don't have to use R to do that at all. And yes, I've used R, but the way I'm thinking, and I've done it for Dennis and I stuff, is much simpler. There you go. So Dennis,
live on the show, folks.
This is good. I hadn't thought of this question. Yes, this, folks, if you want to figure out where I'm going with all this over the years, Consistency or ceiling. Oh, I like this good stuff. I better get rid of this. We might want to delete this. This is too good.
So I have another question to ask it.
Oh, okay. You want to ask Grok a question?
Yeah, let's ask Grok a fresh question.
Sound like Spock, doesn't it? Didn't they do?
Okay.
You think they did that because Star Trek and
It
Spock? Because
probably,
okay,
yeah.
let me tell
So,
you, Grok, Dennis, Grok there is a science fiction book from the 1960s by Robert Heinlein called Stranger in a
ooh,
Strange Land. And it's about a Martian, and the way he takes knowledge in, he calls it grokking. So I suspect that these sci-fi nerds, old time like me,
oh,
because nobody's read
yeah.
that book since the 60s. But and so there was uh, uh, bumper sticker. I grok Spock, and that was back in the 70s. So you really had to be, Dennis. I'm telling you, let's let's stop sharing. Let's go to I grok Spock and see what it says. Uh, I grok Spock. There you go. So first thing, and I'll show you where I think uh, uh, they got grok, and I know they have said that, Dennis, and share. So where is it? Right here. So only us old nerds. So I grok Spock. Grok is a Martian term for deep understanding from Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. The novel was so popular in the 60s that it became part of the lexicon if you were a science fiction nerd. And this was back when you'd get pelted with eggs on the playground if you know, said science fiction here. Star fact, random days, I grok Spock. Can somebody explain this to me? So that's why it's Stranger in a Strange Land, found in many dictionaries. Yeah, one of the earliest proof that Trek fans were considered nerds. Yeah, we were back in the day. So grok is for understanding, Dennis. So that's where, okay, grok comes from uh on this whole thing. So I would educate Dennis. You got your nerd education for the day, but that's where it came from.
so
Was the book that
so
I
I've
read.
heard of the author. I've heard of the author, but I
Yeah.
never read that book. Now, of
Oh,
course, I
that's
want
a
to read
great
that book.
book. Yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
good book. I recommend highly uh Robert
So
Heinlein
I have a
Stranger.
question. I
Okay,
have a
let's get
I have a
back.
question for Grok.
See, sometimes Dennis, I get off a little bit. You got to bring me back in. So I grok Spock. So I knew that back when I was a teenager. Okay, so what are we going to ask Grok today? Maybe we should have this as a feature
So
or something.
very, very simple. Very simple.
Mm-hmm.
What is the best stat to use? Best
Yeah,
stat to use
for predicting.
for yeah, best best stat for predicting
Mm-hmm.
fantasy football results.
Football. This is what you do when you've had, your Heineken beer. Reading Robert Heineken. Let's see. Here's my spelling is bad because I get excited. Fantasy football results. Okay, let's ask Grok.
Let's ask Grok live on the show.
Yeah. Oh, Rutro. Dennis, Rutro.
I love
Opportunity
this.
metrics.
because we've talked about opportunity all the time.
Target share, supporting stats, expected limitations, gets injured, falls behind.
I love this because what this exercise just told us is what consensus believes.
Yes.
Nothing more. Okay. And that's why you don't fear AI. Because your idea, anyway, is to beat consensus. So isn't it smart to know?
It's called reference class forecasting.
Yeah.
Find out what is out there and then figure out where you differ. And with your diary, Dennis, let's complete the circuit, shows that you're good at whatever, right? I mean, if you're not better than consensus, then there's no use in driving yourself crazy. Just, flow where you have an advantage, in dynasty or redraft or best. Use your diary to make you some money. That's what we're trying to do. So anyway, Dennis, this is good stuff. You should be doing Grok every day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And this is the reason that you don't fear AI, because it's not going to come up with original ideas that nobody ever thought of. It's going to come up with a consensus, a look at the consensus, and it's right. Target share, carry
they're
volume,
saying opportunity metrics,
usage. Yes.
Yeah. Look at this. Target share.
But notice what it did not say. It did not talk about consistency.
No, because nobody's.
It did not talk about weekly value.
No.
Identifying weekly value.
No.
But what we're doing is exactly what Grok says is the best way to predict. We're just doing it in a different way.
Right.
And that will beat consensus. We've already proved that we can use our metrics to beat consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Better at some positions than others.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why we then build a strategy that takes advantage of the uncertainty, because I don't know who's going to get the most target share or carry volume.
Right.
With definitive knowledge in more than 11 backfields this year. But if I draft two of the leading contenders in the same backfield, I've increased my odds of being right, because I wasn't so stubborn and saying, oh, I'm going to pick this guy because he's definitely going to be the one. If I do that on 7 teams, I pick 7 running backs, all from 7 different teams, I could be right 7 times. I could be wrong 7 times. But if I pick my 7 or 8 running backs from 4 or 5 fields, now even if I'm wrong on the first pick, I've got to be wrong on 2 picks on that same team. I've increased my odds of being right. And then in some cases, in our split backfield world of NFL that we live in, if I bet on Rachaad White and Buck Irving last year, took them in different parts of the draft, I was able to get them in every draft that I wanted them. I ended up with 2 starting running backs, not just 1.
Right.
And those are so if I'm wrong and it's a complete split in the backfield, I might end up being more right, because now I've got 2 legitimate starters. No, I don't have 2 RB1 guys, but I might have an RB1 middle ground and an RB2 middle to late. or I might have two RB2s towards the
Mhm.
top half of that group. Doesn't matter. It matters where I'm getting them in ADP. And that's the key here. You notice no words. We didn't ask the right question about the smartest way to draft.
Nope.
But look whose name came up.
Yeah, Matthew Berry.
Matthew Berry. Because he is a man
Real
that
time
moves.
shift. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's the one who moves the needle. The man is on TV. The man is all over the place. He's going to move the needle. You need to pay attention to the needle movers. Doesn't mean you have to listen to them. They're going to be right a lot.
Well,
But what they're going
consensus
to
is right a lot.
consensus is right a lot. But what it does is it takes away value when these guys are right.
Well, it just shifts the value.
Yeah, it shifts the value. And if you are right on a particular matchup, or you take my method and you say, I don't have a clue who the leading running back is going to be for the Giants, but I'm really confident it's either going to be Tracy or Scapo. And if I manage to roster both of them, I'm all right. That's the theory that we need to keep thinking about is if I'm wrong, does my strategy make it more likely that I won't suffer from being wrong? You know, if I'm taking Saquon Barkley this year, as crazy as it sounds, I'm leaving the draft with A.J. Dillon. Last pick of my draft. Nobody believes he's going to do anything. Nobody believes he's the true backup to Barkley. I think he is. He's not valuable unless Barkley goes
You could
down.
ask Gronk the question.
I could ask Gronk the question. And I'll guarantee what the answer is. It's like, who? You know, he's so far off of everybody's radar. But he'd be my 20th pick in the draft. I would take a starting kicker and a starting defense in a standard FPPC league where those are still played before I'd take A.J. Dillon. But with my 20th pick, I'm taking somebody who has upside. I'm taking Tua. I'm taking A.J. Dillon. I'm taking some other player that has a route to volume. And he's only got a route to volume if catastrophe strikes Philadelphia.
Uh-oh. Dennis, something. Okay,
but
there we go.
But if catastrophe strikes Philadelphia,
Yeah,
and I have Saquon Barkley on my roster,
yeah,
and he gets hurt, and I've got a backup that might end up being the guy,
yeah.
I'm in a lot better shape than if I took 9 different running backs from 9 different teams. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It never hurts to have insurance. Like the only time you ever regret a decision on an insurance policy purchase is when catastrophe strikes and you didn't
have it
to pay for the. Yeah. That's the only time you care, you know.
And if you do Grok or any kind of thing where there's bullet points, and if you want to confound people, I've done it at scientific meetings. They'll show, for instance, to predict fantasy results, here are the 4 bullet points. And I ask the question, is the first bullet point the most important, or is the 4th the most important, or is there some order, or is this random? In other words, people will look at the top prior time. Okay. By the time they get to the 4th, they're kind of, that first bullet point kind of anchors you a little bit. So just be aware that you can be tricked by bullet points a little bit, and people get bamboozled. In other words, they might have picked prioritized players with high target is their number 1. then I would argue put a percentage, put an odds, put a probability. If you really wanted to do it right, keep that thinking in probability. In other words, I think that prioritizing players with high target share is 50% of the way to predict. 50%. Okay, no wonder you put it number one. If you think cross reference with team context is 50%, then why is it number three? In other words, this
Oh yeah.
Brock may have done this randomly, which I don't see, PUCM, so there's no alphabetical. So if there's something here, there's something underneath this. You just be aware. There's always something, right? There's always something behind the curtain. Sometimes you forget. That's why I like top down, Dennis, versus bottom up. And I think people get confused and tricked by some of the just like I said, you don't think about it. Oh, well, I guess the first bullet point's the most important. Is it? If it is, great. But I would like you to put, oh, it's 50% of the show, 40%, 30%, 20%. It would be nice. And I'm not saying we're going to do that because they're not paying us to tell all our secrets. Okay. So when I do my principal component analysis, Dennis, I don't know if I should show our formula. I think I'm not going to. I'll just show the at the after the black box. I mean, Bayer doesn't show. He describes, right,
No.
but he looks at trips. He does a lot of things in the black box, even though he comes out with a figure. Is an 80 still an 80 when the trip was different? You know, I'm saying in horse racing, you know, some of the handicappers, they will try to incorporate that trips and, jockey change and, workout. I mean, there's lots of, but is an 80 an 80, right? Is prioritizing with high target share, is that number one? Then I would argue if it's 50% of the show, are the other ones the same amount or is there one that's 25% of the show? At some point, if I knew 80% of the show, maybe that's enough to beat consensus. Because if you don't, in other words, if I tried to do this and this and this and this time wise, see, this is not divided by time. I have 20 hours a
No.
week. Do I have 5 hours to do this, 5 to do that? In other words, should I divide my time that way? They don't show you time or resources or whatnot. In Dynasty, is this more important versus redraft? What percentage is this? They're just saying this, I don't know what they're doing. They're just saying predict results in what. And they do mention, see, if you're looking for league type, I can tailor the answer. In other words, it's telling you can go deeper. Like in redraft, you could ask Grok the question in redraft and dynasty and best ball. Would you get the same four bullet points and would they be in the same order or not? I'm curious what's in that black box that Grok says. See, but Dennis, that's what I worry about is if you, okay, here's the AI, but what is it telling me really? What's the percentage? What's the
Yes.
probabilities? That's what and that's fine. If they don't say that, then that makes it easier to find an advantage. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, folks. If you do use this, you still have the time. How much time do you have to track target share or whatnot a week or something? I
And
in
that's and
yeah.
that's
Let me hammer it home. In our weekly discussion, we use DAPS, we use changes in our
yep.
consistency, and I like to use efficiency, home away, together, I use those not as the end of the discussion, but you and I think about what it's saying and what's happening today, right? We're not weather, whatever. In
Yeah.
other words, this should be the beginning. It should never be the end, folks. And I think when they finally get that auto AI, it's going to be the end. And it really should be the beginning for you to think, look at your diary, do all that, find extra stuff like we're doing outside the mainstream. Go ahead.
In personally speaking, and this is a logic conclusion by me as a forecaster of all sorts of data over my lifetime, it's important to forecast what you can understand. And the one thing that we really understand in fantasy football is how many points were scored. And if we track that on a weekly basis, and then we look at a player and say, okay, is the situation better or worse than the last 2 years or 3 years, where we have a fixed understanding of what that player did? Now we have a value for that player. But that number of what that player is worth in fantasy points on a weekly basis means absolutely nothing until we judge that against their ADP. And what we're really forecasting anyway is a range of outcomes. And at different ADPs, your focus needs to be on different things. But before you can get there and make logical conclusions, you got to understand the ADP. And Professor, the last 3 seasons, one thing I've learned is that you are the master at tracking this ADP for us. And it's site specific,
Yeah,
folks.
it is.
It's
because that's where we're going to play for best ball. This is best ball.
Got to be for where you play the game.
Definitely.
And it differs between an upstart dynasty team
definitely
versus a redraft versus a best ball.
Yeah.
But as long as we're on the same platform with the same scoring rules, FPPC, PPR,
with tight end
premium.
Yep.
And you have 2 flex positions.
Yes, you do.
And you start
2
running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 quarterback.
Yeah, it is not a super flex.
And 2 flex.
Yeah.
So you know what your standards are, and you know what the leagues are. And that I cannot take the same data from that and then draft a league
at Yahoo
where I have 1 quarterback and 9 flex positions.
Oh my goodness.
Like they do, like that's what we're doing in Scott Fishbowl this year.
Oh my goodness.
We're doing 9 flex positions, basically. So when you're in an environment like that, it's going to be a very unique ADP, but our values of our players will be similar. And this year in Scott Fishbowl, they're grading more, they're giving more points for volume. My MVP identifies high volume guys on a weekly basis. It's a consistent upside volume. In order to score more points, it's pretty simple. You're not consistent unless you're getting the volume. So my MVP should do fairly well in Scott Fishbowl.
You should do an article.
I will.
Scott Fishbowl targets. See, I'm inspiring Dennis. You might do it
Yeah,
like predicted high volume, mid volume, low. Just kind of put it, you know, and I don't know, probabilities. I like when you do these probabilities. It's really good because it forces you to make some breaks in tiers, and you know, you got to step out a little bit. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's
making you work, and
it,
you're yeah,
and that's the key is we've got to look at we got to look at the 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 unique stuff, you
yeah,
know, and see. And I'm not going to try to predict it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I get a couple value quarterbacks
yeah.
because quarterbacks are still scoring more, and I can still start two of them.
Nice.
Okay, but the rest of the roster, I don't care what position the guy plays. Tight ends, I'm still not crazy about the non super elite tight ends. Even in a tight end, they're not going to move the needle enough for me. I would rather have a running back that's getting 300 touches than an Ajoku at tight end or a Freermuth who, if they score a touchdown, great. They're going to score. They're going to have a great week. But if they don't, what is their consistency going to be? They're better than the rest of the guys, but they're not even close to the top 2 to 4 guys. But so I probably won't. I may not even draft a tight end because I believe again the consensus belief that a tight end premium is going to move the needle. Maybe not if you're giving volume points. Maybe the running backs are going to be the guys that benefit from that if you can be right about volume. Or if you're starting 9, why not have a great offense and have both guys? Now you're going to get every touchdown from the running backs. You're going to get a quarter point for every carry, you're going to get something for every reception. I'm set. If I got White and Bucky Irving, I got Monty and Gibbs, I'm pretty happy because those are 2 very good offenses. And I'm now guaranteed to get almost all the touches. So
So,
that's kind of the strategy that I'm thinking now. It'll probably adjust before the draft in a month.
so I got the ADP, Dennis, and I'm just going to kind of take folks my process, and then we can hit specific teams or players. So first thing I do is copy, put it in a spreadsheet, and I like to highlight tight ends uh, and quarterbacks. And this color here, this
Yep.
is by round. So I put by round. So first thing's really McBride and Bowers, 2 tight ends in round 1. We've never had 2 tight ends
Wow.
in round 1. Look at Bowers, 4th pick. So it's very surprising. And then
Wow.
I highlighted quarterbacks. Okay, so what does that do? That kind of tells you your decision on tight ends. Look, in other words, Bowers, McBride, depends on your draft position. If you want a tight end, that's your choice. If you got draft pick 7, you may get McBride, and he could get aggressively picked. I could see somebody wanting Bowers and have the 5th or 6th pick and say, "Damn it, Bowers is gone. Well, I'll take McBride." I could see McBride even being pushed further because Bowers has moved. He was 11th a month ago, and now he's moved
Wow.
up to 4. So there's a lot of pressure. I predict that McBride will be moving up maybe by July because people are going to miss Bowers. They're coming in. I got to have that tight end, and I think Kittle is going to be forced up. So right now, if you miss these 2, then it's Kittle, And if you don't like him, then you can wait and get Laporta or Hawkinson, Kelsey. And so it looks like you start getting four right in this region. So this starts, Dennis, giving you the landscape on it. So you need to plan, how do you want to handle quarterbacks, tight ends, and then quarterbacks, same thing. Look at this round here. You know, round 2 to round 3, you got 5 choices. Who do you want? Okay. We can you live with somebody else? If so, then you can drop down and start picking these 3. Okay. If you're thinking, damn it, I can still get deeper, then you can maybe go here. So you can start planning kind of a map of the draft, and you just need to start filling in, what do I want? Right? Who do I want? What do I want? So getting over the plague, Dennis. I do difference between max and min, just to look at players that are have a broad uh, opinions about. So the first broad opinions is Jacobs and Kyron. They're 13th to
Wow.
32nd, 17th to 35th. So
Wow.
there's a lot of diverse opinions. So what is your opinion? You know, that kind of thing. So this is planning. In the first round, the biggest diversity is CMC at 8. Okay. So are you buying he could be as good as 14th or bad as 14th or high as 6th? The next round, okay, it's, these guys right here are the highest, that kind of thing. I notice Henry's a 12, and then it's kind of early second. Henry's a little bit
Yeah.
controversial. So this will point to you where things might, in other words, if you love Henry, I'm saying I could, by this data, I could see he might drop further than you think. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of thing. So this sets the table up for, like I said, Josh Allen. There's some opinions as a quarterback, the first quarterback. So notice Lamar Jackson, a little bit more steady, and Josh Allen is worse or better. So there, like I said, this is not to say Allen over Jackson. It's just to remind you that there's some diversity of opinion about where he's going. So you need to decide. Rashee Wright is the first running back, wide receiver. So is Harrison. And Cook is controversial. Imagine that. He's holding out. So this can point, the way I do this, I just highlight, and it allows me to point to things. The one that's really deep, Caleb
Woo.
Johnson. Look at that. Pittsburgh, 42, Dennis. Look all
Wow.
around him. You don't see that. So again, what's your opinion about him? Okay. So this just highlights some really tricky examples. Here's Mayfield is 60. So there's a lot. I mean, they see him
Wow.
being great or sucking. So this will point you on to some area. If I'm drafting tomorrow, I'm studying this stuff hard, right? To get tendencies. You need to know this, folks. You don't need to be in a time draft, realize that, wow, there's a lot of controversy here. Do I want him or not? You need to have at least worked through that in your head a little bit, you know, like, no, I'll take Knicks. If Knicks versus Mayfield, I'll take Knicks. I think he's safer. Fine. That can be your opinion, but you just don't need the clock to be moving and you trying to, oh, which one, Knicks. And then you pick one and you're mad because, maybe you thought, man, I should have took Knicks. Right. It's the woulda, shoulda. So why not know it's coming and not be surprised? Why put pressure on yourself? That's why I do slow drafts. So anyway, I do that, Dennis. And then finally, another thing that I do, people, is I group by the ADP ranking and the team and position. So you can ask the question, how many teams there's two running back wide receivers. Here's one with three. There are some with four. Here's one with five. So right away,
Wow.
you see, they're saying the third WR doesn't even count. Whereas here, it starts to count. And right here, Jimmy Horn is pretty deep, but it's still on the board.
Wow.
So this starts giving you an idea. Then here's something else. You can start using quarterbacks. You could divide the quarterbacks into highly ranked or not and compare what their running backs look like. So for Josh Allen, Cook is 37, then Ray Davis. But somebody like Bryce Young, which is not well thought of, Hubbard is 51. So Cook 37, Hubbard 51. So what does that say about people's opinions of the quarterbacks versus the running backs? I mean, it just starts juggling some of these values within teams. So if you're looking for something, if you're looking for, backup, if you're looking for Dennis's opportunities index, you can plug that in. And it's just, look at Cleveland. They've got three quarterbacks listed. Does that tell you something?
Wow.
Dallas
Wow.
has two.
It tells me I'd probably be. And here's the thing: is I'm going to be passing on all three
Well,
of the
I'm
Cleveland
just saying, but
quarterbacks.
the public is saying they're not sure. But look, at
Yeah.
Chicago, Caleb Williams is there's on. So
Yep.
who is on the board and who is not? Look at Burrow, one. There is no backup. So the question I might have is it better to fish in here for your second or third quarterback, or should
Ooh.
you
Yeah.
find
I see what
Burrows?
you're saying.
Yeah, in other words, or Caleb. You see, the public is saying they're paying
And this
more
is
attention
best.
here. This is best ball.
Yeah.
So, Dennis, I'm going to let you
Best
take
ball.
over from
Yes.
here. There's my process. I get deeper still, but I'm just showing y'all what I'm thinking about right at June 14th.
No, and I love looking at these players by variance
Oh,
because
yeah.
it lets you it lets you make a legitimate decision. So let's say I'm coming down through the draft and I'm eyeing Baker Mayfield.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's an
So
issue
so let's move down to Baker Mayfield's situation.
right here, quarterback. You
So
got Bo Nix
I'm looking at
and you
this
got
situation.
Mayfield
Yeah.
and Kyler Murray
And I'm
right
saying
there.
you know what? I'm okay if I don't get Baker Mayfield, I'm okay with having Bo Nix. Like either one of those, I have as decent quarterbacks
Yeah.
at that level. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I understand the uncertainty with Baker. He had a huge year last year, but he hasn't replicated that. He had a solid year the year before, but not like last year in fantasy football. Last year in fantasy football, he had an all
And if you
a
go
new
over
new
to
stratosphere.
teams, Dennis, look at his wide receivers, Evans and
Oh
Godwin in the
yeah,
top 70.
yeah,
So
and
versus say Denver, Bo Nix, and see what Denver. Look,
yeah,
it's Cortland Sutton, and then it drops. So
and then
two
it's
different
yeah,
quarterbacks, almost the same, but the wide receivers are in a different group. But people are thinking maybe Ingram is going to pick up as the second pass guy. You see, you start playing these scenarios to help you maybe break that decision tie, Dennis. So that's why when I do
yeah,
this,
and it,
we could use that as a way to break that decision.
and when I'm looking at it, I look at the variance of both of those players.
Big difference.
I take half the variance and add it to wherever I am in that draft.
Yeah.
And I say, you know what? Maybe I can drop another round here. Maybe I can add a maybe I'd add Brian Robinson as my fourth running back here. And I wait one more round on quarterback.
You could.
Because I think either Mayfield or Nix has a chance to fall. If they don't, then how do I feel about the next
Kyler
level
Murray
of quarterbacks?
or Caleb or Fields?
Yeah.
That's your question.
And
how do you feel about that?
That's how you work your way through a draft. And what I generally do, and I love this highlighting of quarterbacks and tight ends.
Yes.
Because here is my strategy early in a draft. So go to the first round.
There it is.
So first 6 picks in the draft. I'm comfortable with Chase, Robinson, Gibbs, Jefferson, Lamb, Neighbors, St. Brown. I know I'm going to have somebody I love anywhere in those first 6 picks because there's guys past the 6th pick that I say are as valuable as the top 6, which means I'll pass on Brock Bowers at 4. Now,
could you live with Kittle then? Because you probably won't get McBride.
I could probably live.
Or you want to drop further.
I could live with Hawkinson. I could live with Hawkinson.
Kelsey,
I could live with Kelsey.
Ingram.
I could live with maybe Ingram, maybe somebody else. Here's the key. It's not that I don't think that Brock Bowers and Trey McBride are going to be the top tight ends. Yeah. It's just that I'm not sure that they're going to beat the 3rd through 5th tight ends by enough that it makes it worth my bet to take one of those. Now, McBride is a different animal than Brock Bowers. Now, if I get to the 8th pick, let's say I'm picking 8, and Bowers, Neighbors, McBride, St. Brown are all there for me. Now I've got a tough decision to make because I'm picking 8. I got 4 guys I really like. Okay. And one of those 4 is going to be available with my 2nd pick, possibly. And if they're not, I've got another 4 or 5 guys that I think are pretty close. But in that circumstance, because in order for Bowers and McBride to both be available at 8, it means that somebody past 8 went ahead of him, went ahead of Bowers already. So now I'm sitting there going, well, hell, maybe I'll take Bowers. If McBride is still on the board and I'm picking at pick 10 or later, I'm going to consider it because McBride could lead his team in targets again this year. Like he could be the guy. He could beat out Marvin Harrison as the most valuable receiver on that team, even though he's a tight end. And keep in mind, folks, this is tight end premium. If this wasn't tight end premium, Bowers and McBride wouldn't be going in the first round.
No.
They'd be going more in the 2nd round.
3rd, yeah.
Now, when I do my MVP forecasts, that isn't on a tight end premium scale. Okay. I judge my tight ends against regular scoring, not tight end premium. So when I look at a guy, he's got to be really special. It's got to be a Bowers, McBride, Kittle, Kelsey that moves the bar. So in other words, it has to be a tight end that has the potential of leading his team in targets to take that tight end premium seriously. because even though I like TJ Hawkinson as a tight end, he's not beating Justin Jefferson out for leading in targets with Minnesota. Now, Mark Andrews could, if he stays healthy, beat out Flowers and anybody else at the wide receiver position on Baltimore, but they might not be throwing enough for that to matter.
So if you have that question, Dennis, you can go over here to the team level and see Andrews is 81, Flowers is 58, but after that, it's Bateman. So it looks to me like Andrews is in the running. I mean, the public would say Flowers over Andrews, but it would, like, as you say, there's an opportunity there.
It's a possibility versus other teams where you look at their situation. Like, I like Colston Loveland for Chicago this year. For Chicago as a rookie. But he's not going to even finish second in targets.
Well, the public would say maybe fourth.
Oh, yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd say maybe he could finish third in targets among his team.
Okay.
And here I'm counting DeAndre Swift because Swift is going to get quite a few targets as a running back.
Yeah.
But there's no way that Loveland is going to beat all of those wide receivers and Swift unless they all get hurt,
Yeah.
So but I still like him, but I don't value him higher in tight end premium than I would in a regular tight end, a regular league that's only PPR. That's what I'm saying. So you got to watch the tight end premium and only let it overvalue the tight ends that could lead their team in targets. But I love the way you're looking at this ADP data because you have to know where your variance is.
Yes.
Because here's what I hate that people do. Okay. So let's look at Joe Burrow, for instance.
Okay. Joe Burrow.
Love Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, I have as my highest rated quarterback in weekly value. And he's going about 46 right 46. Now. So you got to get him in the fourth round. Right?
Got to.
Well, his variance says that he could last until as late as 55.
So you could slip to the fifth round.
So if I was drafting in the 48th position and Burrow is still there, but I really liked DJ Moore or Alvin Kamara or one of these players that, is left on the board at that position. And I say, you know what? I'm going to gamble. And if I take, let's say I'm drafting 46th, I'm going to draft again at pick 51.
Right.
Right. So I think I did the math right on that. Actually pick 50. I'll be drafting again. So I've got to withstand 4 more picks before I come back. If I pass on Burrow at pick 46, where he is going most often, or the median of where he's going, I have a decent chance of getting that guy in the next round because he could drop 4 more positions. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Then I have a different game plan at quarterback. But as long as I don't fall in love with somebody and say, I gotta have him, I'm okay with that.
And Dennis, you can do what I'm doing, which is draft pick. So if you're curious,
love it.
I've done this before. I've asked the question, what players do you naturally fall in on with draft pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? So you could sort this way. So this is another way to look at the data that I don't see people really talking about. But anyway, at 46, that means
here's a case in
Dennis, it means you're a 1. That means you've got a second pick right there. So if I pick Burrow, You can
Actually,
take Hawkinson.
I think
Did I mess it up?
I think you missed somebody along the
Oh,
way.
I did. I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right here. Yeah, silly me. And uh that's why we uh we have somebody to watch over your daily because I did that too quick. A series minus one. Okay. So anyway, no, but you can't have zero.
Yeah,
So
but that's where
now, huh?
you'll
Yeah,
duplicate that from there.
right. So
Yeah.
that's what you do. And so the
So
46
46, I
then
was picking third.
third.
I was picking third.
So you'll
Yeah.
have one at 51.
Yeah. So I'm 46, then I'm 51.
Burrow could
And
slide.
yeah, and I know going in, I got myself a really good player with the third pick.
I mean,
Okay.
Hurts, theoretically, he could be at 47. How about that?
Yes. Yes.
So there are some
Yes.
opportunities there.
Yeah, and that's the way I love to look at this data is to say, okay, if I miss on this player, here's why I target clusters of players, not one guy. Because I know that where I'm going to be. And I love this strategy too of looking at the rotation of the draft.
Yes, on top.
And
And
it tells me
if it was a third round reversal, then you could, plug that in as well. So
yeah,
you couldn't be, you don't have to be bamboozled before it happens. You could go ahead and see what's going on.
and speaking of third round reversals,
I know.
so Scott Fishbowl has
I do.
almost always been a third round reversal. When I got my invitation this year,
Yeah.
I noticed
Yeah.
that it didn't say third round
And so I
reversal
knew
and had
people would get cranky about that.
People got cranky. And first of all, here's the deal. It's a free league.
Yeah.
You're
Damn it.
it's an
I
honor.
paid big money for this.
It's an honor to play in the Scott Fish Bowl.
Yeah.
It's a league, or it's a tournament style setup that a lot of people pay attention to. A lot of big names play in that tournament every year. It raises money for a good cause. It's a fun group. It brings people together. Why are you getting cranky over something that's fun, first of all? But when I was signed up, I looked at it and I said,
interesting.
No third round reversal. This is mentioned. And it's been mentioned the last 3 years when I got the invite.
Right.
Maybe he just left it out. Maybe it's going to be a third round reversal, but maybe it's not. So when I picked my draft spot, usually in Fishbowl, I've picked the late spot. I've picked 9th through 11th is my main position to target, because I get 2 very good players and then I get a third really good player. And it might vary depending on what I think of the draft that year. But I saw people getting angry when I didn't see it in there. You know what I said to myself? I said, pick something in the middle. That way, if there's a third round reversal, great. If there isn't, it doesn't hurt you. Pick something in the first, like 3rd through 6th. Now I'm in good shape. I'm getting a better player in the first round than I would if I was going 8th through 11th. And I'm okay in round 2, and I'm better in round 3 if there's no reversal. This is the kind of way you have to think through a problem in a situation. And if there was a third round reversal, I wouldn't lose it either because it's a free league. It's an honor to be invited. Just shut up and enjoy it. Anyway,
Agree.
had to get that rant in.
Well, anyway, Dennis, this just shows you some things that I do. And like I said, I'm not drafting till probably July for best ball. So I got plenty of time. But I'm going to save this file, Dennis. So I think I've got the May 15th file. We'll have June. So just
Perfect.
saving for a rainy day for us to look at things. But right off the bat, seeing Bauer up to 4, we've never seen that before. Kelsey at his day was like 10th, 11th. Just one. Now having McBride slip in, that's just crazy. I just don't know if I could take either one of those.
No, and here's what I'm going to tell you. He's changing offenses. Bowers is.
Yes, he is.
Last year, they didn't have a running back. They didn't have a running back that was worth spit last year.
Yeah.
The best wide receiver they had was Jacoby Myers, who's a solid WR2 in that real NFL and in fantasy football. Good, solid. I'll take him any day of the week as my RB, WR2, WR3 kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
They added a guy by the name of Ashton Giant.
Yes, they did.
They changed quarterbacks to Geno Smith, who has zero track record of using his tight end with a heavy volume load. He's never had a tight end as talented as Brock Bowers.
Nope.
So that will change this year. But Brock Bowers is not guaranteed to be the top tight end this year. I just pointed out reasons where he could drop a little bit versus what he did last year.
And Dennis, let me just throw a few things in. Notice Michael Mayer is listed as the tight end 2, and people are drafted. Notice Myers, Jacob, is 87th. Giante. So if I'm the defense, I'm working the line against Giante, and we're double teaming Bowers. Who's left? You could argue Myers might be the best pick there. I mean, you could do a lot of, just see what kind of value you can get. But notice Arizona, there is only one tight end listed. So the public is not drafting McBride's second. They are Bowers. So is that a weaker support? I mean, that's the kind of data that as I start saving for us, Dennis, we can ask that question. If the public, even as deep as that is, 257, is that tipping the hand that maybe McBride is a little bit more, quote, safer? Don't know. Those are things that I think about when I'm seeing this data.
And in weekly values, my weekly value, my MVP statistic, Brock Bowers was not the top tight end last year.
There you go.
He had a 90. He was in the 90s. That was solid. Mm-hmm. But Kittle was one in the 140s. And McBride was over 100. So I'm not saying that Brock Bowers is a bust. What I'm saying is there is concern that he might not hog the targets like he did last year. And he was only at 94. He was only in the 90s in MVP last year. Let's say he lives up to that and he plays back to last season. That's not fourth pick value. Fourth pick value is Travis Kittle. Travis Kittle in 2022.
We need Travis Kittle.
I'm sorry, Travis Kelce in
No,
2022 where
I've
he
got
had
a new
a
tight end, Travis
129.
Kittle. I want Travis Kittle
Yeah, I want best of both worlds. I want a guy that
that does
is young.
both.
Yeah, I want a younger Kelsey.
Yeah.
But that's my point, is that there's reasons for every player to be higher or lower than last year. The only reason that I would say for Brock Bowers to be better than last year in MVP,
Mm-hmm.
he's on a better offense. That's good. He's a year smarter in playing the NFL, yet he's only age 23. That's good.
Yeah.
So there's two good reasons that he could be higher than last year. And I have his upside at 120 this year,
Nice.
which is godlike level for tight ends.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But
But on the flip side, a more run happy offense. Plus, the Raiders had a lot of injuries on defense last year. Now they're getting a better head coach. What if they don't need to throw the ball 45 times a game? What if they're only throwing 35?
Mm-hmm.
Now Brower's share of those targets can stay high, but the end result is lower. On some weeks, maybe he's not even more than a 6 or 7 point guy in fantasy football.
That's not what you want
That's
for fourth pick.
not a fourth pick. Fourth pick, I want a Justin Jefferson. I want a Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
I want a Bijan Robinson or Barkley or Gibbs. I want somebody who can not just lead his position, but dominate. I want a 140 MVP guy.
Out of the first round, I would say yes.
First round, I want 140. I'm greedy when it comes to those guys.
Yeah.
And I think the best case for him is a 120. The logical case for Bijan Robinson is a 140. Like, that's the difference in quality of player. I have Brock Bowers' forecast for a 100 on MVP. That's not good enough to take him in the fourth pick. Because even if I throw a premium on him, that gets him up to about a 125. That's not 140. I want 140. I'm picky. I want unbelievable, sensational with like Bijan Robinson. The only reason that he would drop is if Michael Penix is a worse quarterback than Kirk Cousins. And here's the great part of that. If he is, Kirk Cousins is still on the roster and he'll be playing. Okay. The only other reason he could drop is because he got so much volume last year that they realize they can't run him to death again.
Yep.
And that they use a little more of the backup. But even in those cases, gets him down to like a 110, 120 in MVP. That's his floor. Like, his ceiling is astronomical. Like his best 10 games last year, he had a 200. That's a perfect score. Nobody had a perfect score in their best 10 games except for him. That's the kind of upside that I want from my first pick in the first round. I'm picky that way. I want astronomically high. And he, as great as Bowers is, does not give me that opportunity. So if I take him, I sacrifice something. And I don't want to sacrifice. I would rather, with the fourth pick, get either the second or third best running or the second or third best wide receiver. I'm happier with that as a result.
Nice, nice. Dennis, we've beat this to death here.
Well, you were on vacation, so we had to make up for lost time, but it is a good time to remind you to head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. There will be lots of fresh articles coming out in the week ahead. And check out the professor's ADP data. Look back at last year to see what advantages we could have been plucking, or you could have been plucking out of the ADP like we did last year. Because when we looked at the ADP, we had guys like Chase Brown, Bucky Irving,
Yep.
Amon St. Brown. Like it goes on
Derrick
and on.
Henry.
Derrick Henry. Those were the Saquon Barkley. We loved him versus ADP last year.
Yep.
Those are the kinds of guys that we saw as huge value. Brian Thomas Jr. was another guy. It's all referenced versus ADP, and nobody does it better than the professor. And head on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.
Oh, man, I'm telling you.
You're fired up now. You forgot how much fun when we get together.
When we get together, it inspires me
to do
think
stuff.
Of stuff. Yeah, it really does.
One last thing, because when I think about things, sometimes thoughts come later, and that's fine. I just remember when I asked about the PCA and it said, well, you can do your own, go to ESPN. ESPN doesn't have our Comdata MVP and stuff. So you see, there's the trick, is when you're inventing new metrics that are not out there.
Yes.
You can't test what's not out there. So AI, Dennis, unless they worm into our system and hack in, they're not going to be able to throw ours in the mix. So we're going to have that, advantage, having our own metrics that way. And so I'm just saying, it's good practice. You'll get stuff out of it. Anything you do, like Dennis and I do, our experiment, you're going to get better long term. And keep that diary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I like it. But anyway, that just occurred to me that's the flaw, is you're only as good as what ESPN or Yahoo's or CBS or whoever NFL's database is.
Yeah, because AI, it's assuming that whoever has the most traffic has the best data.
Yeah.
Okay. And we know that's not correct because we understand, based on being able to beat ADP. ADP is driven by a couple of things, and one of it is it's the noise of the masses. Okay, because early on, it's the experts at these sites that set the ADP. And we know from studying across the platforms that the ADP comes closer, but it never gets to exactly the same. And, FPPC starts out at a different ADP than ESPN, than Sleeper. The drafts will change it, but that initial setting of ADP will bias the end result. Even if you got 1 million drafts, that original setting is the consensus that a lot of people accept. So it doesn't change as much as it should at the top 100. I think the second 100 and the third 100, it adjusts quite a bit. But those top 40 at wide receiver and running back, those are the top 40. And if you have somebody outside that top 40 that you like better and think has the upside to make the top 15, man, if you're drafting a guy 65th at wide receiver and he hits top 15, that's gold. That was Brian Thomas Jr. last year. Like, those are the guys I want to hit on every year. And those are the guys that I think we can, because our tools identify them a little better than the masses.
I agree. I
just
agree.
do.
Good stuff.
Very good stuff, Professor. It's great to have you back. Always a pleasure
Thanks.
visiting with you. And
Let me stop.